So, Andrew Loney, once again, welcome to my new podcast, which is the Biographer's Chair. Author of Entitled. And like I said last time, this was a great read. It was awesome. It made me angry. It made me sad, and it made me laugh. And everybody should get that. I'll leave a link down below.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. We were going to talk about Sarah Ferguson today, but the news moves so fast. We've just got to talk about Andrew as well. And the first thing I want to say is that he gave his statement, removing all his titles, the day before Virginia Giuffre's book came out. Do you think that was voluntary, or do you think it was pushed?
Oh, I definitely was pushed. I mean, her book was officially out on the Tuesday, but we'd had some serial extracts, as you say, the few days before that. And on Friday night, it came as a great surprise to me because I didn't think they would take action, but clearly they were worried about what might be in the book, what other things might be in the book, what clearly had appeared already in the serial. And of course, we'd had the previous Sunday the release of the leaked Epstein emails showing that Andrew had lied about when he last saw Epstein. So the problem was getting bigger and bigger. It was threatening to engulf the whole of the royal family, to undermine all the good work they do. And I think they finally got ahead of this story. Well, they didn't on the Friday, actually. They put out, I mean, they allowed Andrew to put out a pretty mealy-mouthed statement, still denying the allegations, making no sort of apology, saying that he had been, he'd stood down 5 years ago when he'd been pushed and that he was standing down now. And of course, it then turned out that he hadn't given up his titles. They'd just been put into abeyance. And I think there was an uproar, public uproar about this. I imagine this was a sort of reaction, with Marie Antoinette and the Russian royal family, but certainly it was what we had when Diana died. And I think finally the palace realized they needed to be a little bit more ruthless. And I think possibly the sinews of the king were stiffened by his eldest son, that this problem wasn't going to go away, and if they didn't take more drastic action. I mean, I've been calling for more public accountability and transparency for a decade now. And, it's very heartening to see that historians are finally waking up to this. The commentators and the papers have been saying we need parliamentary scrutiny, we need the trade files opened, we need them removed from the FOI, we need probably a royal register. And I hope all those things will come. And indeed, that there is a case to investigate Andrew for misconduct in public office. So I do hope that, there are signs of change now. And we will get a little bit more, so we say, disinfectant poured on this.
As you said in his statement, there was no apology, there was no contrition whatsoever. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's just his own stupidity? Do you think he really thinks that he can get away with it, or I don't know why.
Yes, no, he's a very arrogant, pompous man, not very bright, doesn't listen to advice. He feels very entitled, and he can't accept that he's done anything wrong. He just feels he's been victimized. So he lives in his own little bubble, I'm afraid. And he's very, very thick-skinned. I mean, he's still fighting not to be dislodged from Royal Lodge, which, I mean, he will be. It is more difficult, but I mean, I'm sure they will find a way of basically paying him off to leave, because the optics look terrible.
Why were Andrew's punishments done incrementally? Why not just, when this scandal broke, why not just clear the decks? Do you think that was the Queen because it was her favourite son, so she didn't want to punish him too much, or I think that was a big mistake by the royal family?
I agree, and it's a good point you make. I mean, I think that they kind of thought they could get away with it, that they would do the least possible to look like they were doing something without actually really doing anything. And people have seen through that. And that as a result, they've actually probably had to do more than they might have had to do if they'd addressed this in 2019 at the time of the Newsnight interview, or 2022 when he stood down and settled with Virginia Giuffre. I think the Queen was part of it, but I think,
mm,
he has been protected by a whole network, not just at the palace, but, in the in the Parliament, in government, in the
mm.
diplomatic service, in the civil service. Everyone has basically refused to address this problem, and I hope they will do so now.
I hope so. He's not used any of his titles, apparently. The last time that a prince title was taken away from somebody was in 1919 from Prince Charles. Um, he was the Duke of Albany,
Yep, yep,
and
yeah. Very
and
connected with Traitor, with Edward VIII and Traitor King.
yeah.
Um,
And what do you think? Do you think there will come a time when he'll have the prince taken away from him?
Yes, I mean, I think they will make parliamentary time. I think the palace will use letters patent. I mean, if it doesn't happen now, it'll happen with Prince William. But I think, public outrage is such that they have to do
Mm,
something. After Friday, nothing much had changed for Andrew. He was still in Royal Lodge. He was
yeah.
still Prince Andrew if he wasn't Duke of York. I think the interesting question is the Duchess of York, because clearly she used that title to basically
Mm,
sell herself. And she can't do so. I mean, she was actually stripped of her Royal Highness when she got divorced, but she still continued to use it because people don't know the distinction. Andrew
yeah.
still insists on being called the Duke of York and His Royal Highness, and people bowing and scraping to him. So, I mean, behind closed doors, they can do all sorts of things. I think with Sarah, I mean, she will just go off to the Middle East or China or somewhere, and she'll behave exactly as she has here, but we won't know about it, and that's fine. If in some ways I think just they need to get them out of any sort of public out of the sight of the public.
Yeah, I mean, the allegations in Virginia Giuffre's book are devastating, really, that she was trafficked to 3 times, and one of them was an orgy.
Yeah.
Um, Based on those allegations, now obviously that Virginia's passed away, do you think there is a case for prosecution?
Yes, I do believe this book. I mean, Amy Wallace has done her due diligence. I mean, this question of the orgy was challenged by people
Mhm.
before, but she's clearly done her research. So there is a case clearly here for dealing with trafficked women and sleeping with women underage, because I think it would have been a crime on Little St. James. But I think there's a much more important area of investigation, and that's his time as a trade envoy, when I think there is misconduct
Mm,
in public office. He did take advantage of a position to enrich himself personally. And of course, we have the leaked email showing that he tried to put pressure on his protection officer to try and discredit Giuffre, which again is an offence. But he has been
yeah.
doing all sorts of things that he shouldn't be doing for years and not being investigated. I mean, he was putting false information at companies' house about his companies. So I do hope that people will suddenly realize that the royals are not above the law, and
Mm.
he does need to be looked at, and if necessary, charges brought.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. The implications that it was harassment on Virginia when he got his invest tried to investigate her. Do you think that they could? There's a case for harassment there.
Yes, absolutely. And we
Yeah.
now know that he paid Mark Gallagher, PR guy, £500,000 to try and dig up dirt on Giuffre. And I'm aware that there's been attempts to try and discredit my book. So, I mean, this is the
Mm.
way that they behave. It's not the sign of an innocent man. And yeah, I think that the Met should be looking at everything. And I do hope victims will come forward. I've certainly offered material I've got that didn't go into the book for legal reasons, because 20 years ago, the National Crime Agency wanted to investigate him.
Oh
And I
wow.
think those investigations should be opened. And as I say, I
Yeah.
keep saying, I will provide them with material.
Yeah, and I mean, Sarah Ferguson, like you said, has lost her title. Do you think there's a chance that she'll leave him now because that was her cash cow?
Yes, it was. I think that, the press are talking about, them sticking together, but I think you're absolutely right. So you heard it here first with us. Uh, I think she will be tempted to make her own arrangements. I mean, the very interesting parallels with Meghan and Harry. Uh, Meghan is only trying to do what Fergie's been doing for 40 years, just
Mm,
rather more successfully. But, you know, just as I think everyone anticipates the Meghan-Harry relationship won't last, I think that's particularly true here. You know, we already see signs of the daughters trying to distance themselves from both parents.
yeah.
And I think Sarah will try and do her own thing. She'll go off and do her own thing.
And I feel sorry for the daughters. What is the future for them? I mean, their dad, their mum as well, but especially their dad being dragged through all this. What's the future for the princesses?
Well, they're a close family. I think the advice that's been given to them, what I've seen in the papers, is to basically lie low and to keep their noses clean.
Mm,
You know, they've got families, they've got careers, they've got some charitable activities that they do, but you know, people perhaps don't want to hear about the York family for the moment. One lives
yeah.
in Portugal most of the time, and I think you know they're young mothers. They should just get on with their lives. The royal family seem keen to still embrace them, so I mean, I'm sure will go to Sandringham at Christmas
Yeah.
if they don't spend it with their parents. And that's the interesting question, where will they choose to go? But I think that you know, people are not going to blame the sins of the parents on the daughters unless they find there are things in the daughters, shall we say, charitable and business activities, which again
Mm.
don't bring credit on them. And that investigation is going on. I've certainly know of things um, which I haven't put in my book. So I suppose my one bit of advice is the royal family should be careful about embracing them too closely.
Are they actually investigating the daughters' charitable
Yes,
businesses?
I understand the press are doing that, and I think
Wow,
particularly Eugenie's Anti-Slavery Collective and some of the charities that Beatrice is involved in the Middle East. So
wow.
yes, I think that you know we will see more revelations come out about the daughters.
I mean, what really started all this off, this whole snowball of information coming out, was the leaked emails from Fergie to Epstein. She put out a statement condemning Epstein. How long did she wait between putting out that statement to emailing him with an apology?
Oh, I think it was only a matter of weeks.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things I discovered was that she continued to be in touch with Epstein until about 2014 at least, staying at his properties. So, you know, I think I think you're absolutely right. What shocked everyone is that both of them were saying things in public which actually they didn't actually weren't actually doing in private. You know, they're revealed as hypocrites. And, you know, both of them were involved in charities to do with children. Of course, it would have looked terrible if they'd been seen to consorting with a convicted paedophile, but that's exactly what they were doing. It rather sort of shows up perhaps the sincerity of what they were doing with their charities. I've always had this suspicion that the charities were used to launder their reputations and very cynically just enhance their social ambitions.
And she called him a supreme friend several times in the email.
Yeah, well, clearly sucking up to him in a big way, and you can
Yeah.
understand why he was pretty cross because he'd given her large sums of money, which he wasn't going to repay to settle her debts. He'd been pretty good to her, she says, to her family, and here she was publicly trashing him when he expected a bit of loyalty or at least
Mm.
discretion.
And when those emails were released, were there any consequences? Were there, the charitable companies turning their back on Sarah Ferguson?
Yes, I think eight
Yeah.
charities have distanced themselves and have been got rid of her. And indeed, we've seen some of the charities around the daughters also want to distance themselves. I'm not aware of how many charities Sarah is still involved with
Mm.
and whether some have stuck by her. I mean, certainly the research was showing that she was pretty toxic already, and also that her involvement wasn't necessarily a good thing. It didn't actually make much difference to the money they raised. So I think a lot of them are going to be concerned about their reputation, their brand management, and I think they will feel that any links with her are perhaps not very wise at the moment. If
Yeah, I think the whole family is quite toxic at the moment, isn't it?
yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, what we don't know is what more may still emerge, which I think will be much more damaging than has already emerged. So I don't think they can come back from this.
I was going to ask you, do you think that there's more stuff to come?
Yes, I mean, we have the Oversight Committee in the Senate due to release material
Hmm.
on Epstein. I mean, we've just seen from the few leaked emails how damaging that is.
Mm.
Um, there is a drip drip feed which is coming possibly from Ghislaine. The person who's writing these articles, Daphne Barrick, has very close links with Ghislaine. And the suggestion is that Ghislaine is trying to curry favor with Trump. She's taking the picture away from Trump because, of course, he's
Mm.
deeply implicated in the Epstein papers, and that Andrew is the sort of sacrificial victim. But I think we will also see, if we don't see Trump's name, I think it's probably been redacted, but we will see other American officials, um, bankers, politicians, and others, billionaires, who
Yeah.
who will be named shortly.
Let's hope. And what did I know? Fergie had a lot of money from Epstein. What did she say that she was going to do with the money? What did she publicly say she was going to do with it?
Well, she claimed it was only 15,000 and it was to pay off an employee of hers called Johnny O'Sullivan. But I think I've been told by two separate sources it was more like 2 million. And it was to cover her debts, not just to pay Johnny O'Sullivan.
And now there's evidence that Andrew lied to Emily Maitlis. Will there be a deeper investigation into looking, like he said he was at a pizza place on a certain day? Do you think that'll be investigated now?
Well, I think the Met have said that they are looking at allegations that are leveled against them with regard to Epstein. So I hope we can, I hope we can believe it because they didn't really do that before. Um, but I think there is a wide, I mean, there certainly could be calls for investigation into his time as a special trade envoy between 2001 and
Mm.
2011 and what he was doing there. And that's why I'm keen for all those files for that period to be released, which they haven't been. I've been trying to get them for the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that will open up a whole new can of worms. And that's maybe where there's a case for the National Crime Agency. So we have two organizations with the
Mm.
potential to look at him, the Met and the National Crime Agency, on slightly different things, one on the sexual crimes, one on the financial corruption.
Well, seeing as Virginia Giuffre is passed now, do you think the financial corruption is where they'll get him if they're going to get him at all?
Well, I mean, there is another victim of Andrew that's been identified.
That's true.
Sorry,
Yeah.
hasn't been made public, but is there. I think suspect there are other women. I suspect also underage. So even if Virginia Giuffre's testimony can't count, there will be other people I hope that could come forward. And there will be statements, for example, from other girls who, even if they weren't sexually abused by Andrew, would have maybe witnessed things. I think, for example, Sarah Ferguson's material witness to the whole Epstein story. She stayed at the houses rather. There are more numbers for her in the little black book than for Andrew. And yet she's never been called to give any sort of evidence.
Mm.
I mean, the victims' lawyers have called out to the Yorks for them to cooperate. We've had law enforcement in America ask them to cooperate. We had Andrew running up to Balmoral to avoid being served a summons. They haven't behaved up till now as if they are innocents. And I think, it's time for them to face some sort of justice.
Well, he said on Emily Maitlis he was quite happy to cooperate, and then he's done nothing. He hasn't come forward at all with
No,
anything.
he hasn't. And I mean, I do talk in the book about, for example, the mutual assistance treaty that we have with the states and the request from Jeffrey Berman, who was the attorney in New York. So there's plenty of evidence of them avoiding doing anything, and it's there. And I hope that people will use the evidence I've presented to now actually come after them.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, and I've heard you on a few programs talk about this and defend his decision in this, the peppercorn rent that he's paying at Royal Lodge. Um, how does he pay for that? And
Well, we've got to
do
remember,
you think he'll
yeah,
get kicked out?
yeah, well, no, we've got to remember what the terms of the lease were. And
Yeah.
it's a repairing lease. I mean, in return for if he had 1 million to move there, and then he agreed to refurbish it. and he spent £7.5 million. So that, in effect, is his rent.
Mm,
I think the crime there, the two crimes really. One is that that very cozy relationship was never really made public. That we it should have been open to other bidders on the open market. It's Crown Estate property. But also the fact that, when they released the lease, they redacted that element of the peppercorn rent or the negligible rent.
mm,
Um, but you're right. I mean, people are annoyed that he's not actually had to pay any rent, but of course he's had to pay running costs, which I think probably are about £250,000 a year. And of course he's got to pay for his security and everything else. And so, I mean, he's not got it for free. We all know that you can sometimes buy properties very cheaply, but it's the cost of running or renovating them, which is the expense. So I think that's a slight red herring, and I'm not quite sure why MPs have got fixated on that.
mm,
But in some ways, it's an old issue. He looks like he's moving out of Royal Lodge, and the big question is, where will he go? Will he stay in this country,
mm.
I think he seems keen to do, or will he go abroad, as I think, which would be better optics and is what the public wants.
No.
And clearly, if he is being investigated, then he may want to go to a country which doesn't have an extradition treaty with Britain.
Yeah. Um, how is he paying? Because you mentioned his security. How is he paying for that? I mean, is that money that he's got from his mother, or because he isn't working, is he?
Well, he has a pension from the Navy, and it's always quoted about £20,000 a year. I'm sure it's
Mm,
more than that. I wasn't able to find out what it was, but it would have gone up since he left the Navy, which is what, 25 years ago. He inherited money, I understand, from his grandmother before she died, though he may not have directly inherited from the Queen. Well, on her death, I'm sure she made some provision for him at some stage. But also, he's made money from Pitch at the Palace. We've seen some of the sums coming through. I think hundreds of thousands of pounds there. We don't know what's going on at Pitch at Palace China because, of course, the money's paid into a Chinese account. He has
mm,
offshore accounts. He uses nominee accounts. Um, so it's very difficult to follow the money trail because it's so well disguised. But I have no doubt that he's made a lot of money. We've had a few instances in court cases where quite large sums have been revealed. In the Salman Turk High Court case in 2022, he had received £750,000. In the case of a Greek water company in which he was the sort of fixer, he was getting a payment of £3.85 million.
wow.
And I've heard of $500,000 being given to him in a suitcase in Kazakhstan. So, I mean, he's got this. This would keep him going for a while. And of
Mm.
course, Sarah's just sold these two houses in Belgravia for about £4 million. So again, that would keep them going for a while.
And I like how you keep leading me from one question to another because what I
Well,
want
you're probably a good interviewer. You just I jump around and you catch up with me.
to what I wanted to ask you about is the Chinese spy. He's been linked with a Chinese spy. One, is that true? And two, was there any wrongdoing?
Well, Tenbo it came the story of Tenbo came up in a sort of tribunal to actually do with banning him from this country on the orders of the intelligence services. So if the intelligence services are saying that Tenbo is not someone that they want in this country, then clearly one has to take that seriously.
Mm,
He has very close connections with the Chinese authorities, and we know the Chinese government have been basically at war, I would say at war with this country, with cyber attacks, with attempts to infiltrate government and civil service and other things. So, I think probably one has to be careful for legal grounds, which is why everyone says allegedly. But there are certainly a lot of people with close connections to the Chinese government who are in the royal ambit. And I write in my book about a man called Johnny Hon, who also
mm.
is very close to the North Korean government. Again, has been doing business with Sarah Ferguson, that's paying her £270,000 a year, which neither he nor her will explain what it's for. So there are a lot of the questions there, and they've never, either Andrew or Sarah Ferguson, have ever responded to any of these press stories. If they were innocent, they would be, some sort of legitimate response they could give, and they've never done that.
And in your book, you mentioned about him being seduced by a Russian spy. So that's another dodgy country that he's involved in.
Absolutely, and, and I have no doubt that, and I write in the book about the compromising material that's been collected on him, probably from
Mm,
honey traps, in Libya, in Central Asia, in Russia, and Mossad, and indeed by Jeffrey Epstein. We know that there were tapes there that were confiscated by the FBI, and I have various people on the record. There's a guy called Tim Riley talking about the Russian compromat. So yeah, absolutely. There's lots and lots of stuff which is, put him in a difficult position. And the question is, has he given away secrets? Is the reason this stuff hasn't come out because he's played ball with them? And what secrets does he have? Or have they just chosen not to put any pressure on him just yet, but it will come?
well, if he's compromised by all them countries, I think it's definitely going to come. And with fresh allegations over and over and over again, where does that leave the royal family as a whole?
Well, I think, unless they can really distance themselves from Andrew, show that they didn't protect him for many years, which I'm afraid they did, and maybe they have to come clean on that so that they can draw a line in the sand. But if they are prepared to now cooperate with the authorities, in effect, to throw him under the bus and show that they don't want to be associated with him, that he doesn't represent their values, then I think people will forgive them because most people do admire the work of the royal family. And he and Sarah Ferguson, I'm afraid, are sort of rogue royals and exceptions. But they certainly need to clean up their act. I think does need to be much less secretiveness about the way they operate, about, for example, their financial affairs, their tax affairs. These royal wills need to be unsealed. We need to have this royal register, and as I say, the exemption from the FOI. And I think once they begin to do things there and people feel that they can be trusted again, it's a bit like a sort of the last Conservative government, then people will support them.
I don't know whether they will.
Well,
I really don't.
I think support for the monarchy clearly has dropped enormously in the last
Yeah,
week, and whether they can regain that, because in some
I
ways,
don't know.
each time it goes down, it's slightly harder to come back. For a lot of young people, it's seen as an irrelevance. And
Yeah,
so there is a real challenge for William when he comes to the throne about what sort of monarchy he wants to preside over. Will it be the I suspect, a very slimmed down monarchy of just those in the direct line of succession? Will we see titles of all the hangers-on, the Beatrices and the Liliberts and Archies, who are not really working royals? Will they just lose their titles?
mm,
We've seen that, Princess Anne's children don't have titles. Prince Edward's children have been given the choice and I think are unlikely to have titles. So the only ones who've got titles are Prince Andrew's daughters. And I think people feel very strongly that they should, if they don't, either surrender them themselves or they should be taken away from them. And then, of course, we have Harry and Meghan and their children. They seem very insistent on that status, even though
yeah,
they're not actually even living in this country or doing any work. And I think people feel quite strongly that if you're not doing the job, you shouldn't have the title.
yeah. They should go definitely. I'm going to ask you about yourself now for a couple of questions.
Right. Hope I
Um,
can answer.
you come up with some in your book, and I've seen you on interviews as well, some very intimate details. How do you verify those details?
Well, it's a good question. It is difficult. I mean, normally I work with documents. Here I'm working with interviews. And by the nature of the subject, often you will only get one source and they want to be off the record. They've signed NDAs or they're just frightened. Um, and so you have to, I mean, I clearly have to get this through the lawyers with the publishers. The publishers got a lot of material that only, for example, had a single source or they didn't believe. I mean, for example, there was material on Trump that got cut, which is proved to be true. I had Mandelson and his associations with Epstein, that was taken out of the book. I had material on Fergie's continuing links with Epstein after 2010, which again, I didn't quite have enough material to stand it up, or at least a person who's prepared to go to court if necessary, which is the test.
Mm.
and for the hardback. So in fact, that stuff will be added for the paperback. And clearly, I have one particularly good source who is on Andrew's staff, and clearly I have to protect that source.
Mm.
That person has proved to be very reliable throughout my research, but I have to be careful not to reveal information that would identify them. But also, I mean that people, a lot of people say, well, he just makes this all up. He's a salacious gossip monger and stuff. I put my reputation on the line. I have
Yeah.
to make sure everything can be checked out, particularly if people want to take action against me, legal action. And clearly there's been a lot of threats to people like me. I mean, Catherine Belton had it too for her book on Putin. And Michael Wolff has had it from Trump for his book on Trump
Mm.
and Epstein. So, this is a problem. Rich and powerful people will use any means possible to try and discredit a book, whether it's using the law courts, PR firms to leak stuff to the media, you name it. Of course, it's in their interest to undermine the credibility of the book.
And that's what was going to be my next question about the people trying to ruin like, trying to discredit you. Have you had any death threats or anything like that?
No, I haven't had death threats. I mean, I've had, very unpleasant things said about me,
Mm.
both in the media and particularly on social media.
Yeah.
Um, but, that comes with the territory. I've got pretty broad shoulders, I think the encouraging thing is lots and lots of people, having been a lone voice in the wilderness, are quite supportive of this, I suppose, campaign to get more royal accountability and transparency. And that's really encouraging to see other historians speaking up and to feel that the media is now covering this subject seriously and not brushing it under the carpet, to see that Parliament is now prepared to ask tough questions about the royals and how they behave.
Thank you. And finally, we've raced through 20 questions.
Brilliant. Well, all good
Yeah,
questions.
we've done really well. My final question is, what from you next?
Well, I'm going to do Prince Philip next, and I don't think he's a rogue royal. I don't want to be seen just to be doing hatchet jobs. I want to write a revisionist biography. I mean, to have, say new things. And I'm a great admirer of Prince Philip. I think he was very supportive and loyal of the Queen. He was a real free thinker, had this extraordinary intellectual curiosity, a very brave man during the war, a very modest man, a very complex man, a very difficult to childhood, for example. And so a really interesting subject to write about. He's never had a proper biography. I mean, there have been hagiographies over the years from various people.
Mm.
I think he was always very reluctant to talk. He has now, I understand, arranged his papers, so I think a lot of stuff has been destroyed. But I'm hoping that I can talk to people and really get a sense of the man and his achievements, really, because I think without him, we wouldn't have had the successful reign of Queen Elizabeth that we had.
Well, there were rumours of his connections with Nazis. Do you believe that? Is that
No, I don't believe that
them?
for one moment. I mean,
Hmm.
clearly, his sisters, who were German, were married to Nazis.
Yeah.
They were much older than him. Um, and they were getting married in the 1930s too, before perhaps some of the worst information we had about Nazis had come out. But I don't think he, a bit like the princesses can't be tarred with their parents' crimes. His sisters, he can't be blamed for who his sisters married. I mean, they were banned from the coronation and I think his own wedding because it was felt it didn't look very good. But I
Mm.
think his loyalties were entirely to this country. I think his views were pretty moderate. I don't think he was actually a very political person. So I don't think there's any suggestion there. I mean, other members, ironically, of the royal family, not from his side, but actually Queen Mary was sympathetic. We know clearly Edward VIII was,
Mm.
and so I think it's slightly ironic that he should be tarred with that brush when actually it's the royal family here who had the closer associations.
Well, I'll look forward to that, and I'll give that a read, and hopefully you'll come back on and talk to me about it.
Yeah, of course. Look forward to it. Indeed. No, it's always nice to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you, Andrew, for joining me today. It's been another great conversation, and let's hope that this all gets sorted out.
Yes, no. I really feel there's a sense of change here, that something is happening, and that's very gratifying, having sort of been sort of banging on about it for the last decade.
And your book entitled is awesome. There's a link down below, and everybody should read it because it's very, very entertaining indeed. So I'll let you rush off to your next interview, and
Thank you.
I'll see you next time. Stay in touch.
I will indeed. It's lovely to talk to you.
You
Thanks a
too.
lot.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.